Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
I am most pleased to welcome you to a series that's titled Building Healthy Communities. We're only able to bring you this series because during the summer we were very fortunate in our city of Coeur d'Alene to host the Association of Idaho Cities. The city of Coeur d'Alene was the host. Our guest on the first program is Ken Harward, who is the executive director of the very fine organization called the Association of Idaho Cities. Prior to taking the job as executive director of that organization for over 20 years, he was the city manager of Nampa, Idaho. Ken, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're delighted that you brought the association here, and I want to particularly and publicly thank you and all the city officials around Idaho for your theme of building healthy communities at our conference, and also the great emphasis you're giving to people living together in harmony, and really an emphasis on human rights. So welcome, and welcome to this program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And as always, I'm very pleased to have our regular panelist, Janelle Berg, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and she will start our questioning on building healthy communities, part one, with our guest today.
You come very, very highly recommended. Many people who have worked with you indicate that you're most capable. Can you tell us a little bit about why we need an association of cities? And this goes for other states as well as for Idaho. Are there associations of cities in other states? Why do we need them? And who among our citizens live in cities?
Well, there are 49 states that have leagues or associations of cities. The state of Hawaii does not have cities. The counties are the local form of government. In Idaho, we have 201 incorporated cities, and most Idahoans, even though we consider ourselves a rural state, most Idahoans do live within incorporated city limits. And of those 201 cities, there's a continuing need for training and for education of municipal leaders. There's always a need for providing technical assistance. Running cities, even from the very smallest to the largest city in Idaho, is very complex. There's a complex array of laws dealing with public records, public hearings, open meetings, and ethics. And there's a continual turnover in elected officials and also staff positions at the city. So that's one of the most important areas of our city association, is to provide technical assistance and to provide training to municipal leaders.
You've put together an excellent conference, and you've modeled it at the conference around healthy communities. What is a healthy community? What do you consider a healthy community?
Well, a healthy community has many components, but it certainly goes beyond geography. Community speaks of bringing people together. It speaks of inclusiveness. It speaks of shared responsibilities, how we can benefit from the interaction with each other. I've always been intrigued with the notion that even the word city shares the same root word with civilization, and that being civis. And so people come together because we need each other. We need each other for safety reasons. We need each other for economic reasons. We form societies for religious reasons. And so within cities, all of these wonderful interactions occur. And sometimes those interactions can give rise to conflict. And so in a healthy community, there would be appropriate ways of addressing differences and addressing conflicts in a very peaceful way. And I think the fundamental component of a healthy community is a deep, abiding respect for the dignity and worth of each human being.
It's a wonderful answer. I'll let Tony
Certainly
ask the
is.
next question.
I will build on that too. Ken, you and I were talking prior to the program about the whole idea of how people live together in what your theme is in this conference, inclusiveness. It's not always been the case in our country as well as other countries. Through prejudice and bigotry and misunderstandings, we've gone through great struggles of slavery and then segregation and misunderstandings by two people's affiliation with different religious organizations or age or whatever it might be. I just commend this association again. You're doing something for Idaho that's extremely significant. So I make that statement to lead to this question. If one goes back to the 1960s and the Civil Rights Movement and the Civil Rights activists, most of them were non-government individuals. That's had a great success, but now we're changing. Would you share your thoughts about, in relation to this conference, what is happening in Idaho in relation to government entities? And I will ask you to take it even a step further to some of the most prominent corporations in our state and region, certainly the inland Northwest, and their commitment in what they're doing.
Yes, and that's a very interesting point that you make with that question, Tony, that during the Civil Rights Movement, certainly civil rights groups, activists were involved in that effort, but oftentimes it would have been the city leaders and perhaps the corporate leaders that were most inclined to resist the change, maybe block the doors to the schoolhouse or to the city hall when there was an effort to integrate. And so in Idaho now we have very progressive municipal leaders who are ready to join hands and link arms with others, form partnerships with those who have a shared agenda of promoting human rights and human dignity and being part of the solution to make Idaho a better place to live. A place, creating communities where people will feel valued, and that really contributes to a healthy community.
Just a footnote on that and get you to react to it. At the time we're taping this, which is in the summer, it'll air this fall, but the mayor of Boise, Mayor Brett Coles, has just been elected at the time we're taping this program as president of the United States Conference of Mayors, and I was very impressed that I believe he had a 3-point agenda that he would have for his administration, and human rights was one of those points. Or we have the president of Avista Corporation, who has not been with the corporation very long, but certainly as he came to our area, Mr. Matthews has really emphasized not only global trade, but also diversity. Are these the kind of examples that you're talking about that is really, it's a very significant step in the process of building those healthy communities that you are doing at this conference?
Tony, that indeed is correct. And as you said, Mayor Coles has announced that a major objective with his agenda as president of the United States Conference of Mayors is human rights and human dignity issues. And he's very serious about that. And he will be a spokesman at home and a spokesman on the national stage in promoting human rights. And I think that we can see examples all over the state with Mayor Paul Graves in Sandpoint and Mayor Linda Milam in Idaho Falls and Mayor Greg Anderson in Pocatello, Mayor Garrett Nancolis in Caldwell have all come out as very aggressive advocates for human rights and human dignity and really reaching out and not being pushed into this position, but providing the leadership to help make healthier communities in Idaho.
Another good example is Mayor Steve Judy of Coeur d'Alene has joined in many efforts with the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations and the Human Rights Education Foundation. So the evidence is there. One more question, then I'll go back to Janelle and our panel. With all this evidence, and it's very significant evidence, how do we send that as a message across the country, as a counter message to some individuals and groups that have chosen Idaho to live, who teach and advocate a totally different message, a message of divisiveness and hate? Because what we're presenting here with your appearance today is that Idaho is rejecting those messages, where they're looking for a place that does not have diversity and a place that would not be tolerant. I speak of such groups as the Aryan Nation.
Exactly, Tony, and I think that is the message, that we do reject hate. But I also think that what that means now for municipal leaders in Idaho, they need to be the role models and the examples. I think it was Albert Schweitzer said there are 3 ways to teach: by example, with example, and through example. And city leaders are now stepping up and providing examples. And I think even in each city hall in the state of Idaho needs to be an example of that level of commitment to diversity and human dignity and human rights.
Thank you. Janelle Burke.
In every community, there are those people who have a higher economic status than others. In other words, some people make more money. There are greater incomes and lesser incomes. How does a community work to assure that those people who are in lower economic categories have the same kinds of benefits and city government? How does that work? What kinds of things can you think of that communities are encouraged to do in order to provide a good standard of living for all the citizens of the community?
Well, that's another important component of a healthy community. There would be economic opportunities. That even the cities in Idaho provide the engines of economic growth where jobs are created. And that's part of promoting human dignity, we believe also will lead to increased opportunities for new and better jobs. And also, I think with the emphasis on human rights, human dignity, there's a notion of the value of every person. Sometimes when we've seen just too many examples, and we reject as repugnant any notion of superiority over one race over another, and because when one begins to feel that they're better than someone else, that gives rise to them thinking they can mistreat someone else. And that too often occurs with some of the economic differences that are in Idaho.
What kinds of programs also can cities engage in that may provide community centers, libraries, that kind of thing? Are those all important components also of that very healthy community?
Yes, indeed. And cities, through our association, are being promoted as centers of opportunity, for economic opportunity, for cultural opportunity, for recreational opportunity. We feel that that's a very important part of a healthy community.
Can you give us an example of, say, for example, a cultural activity that a community can be involved in, one of the Idaho cities might have been involved in?
I can give you several examples. Let me think. One just quickly comes to mind. The city of Idaho Falls has formed the Mayor's Committee on Cultural Awareness. That's a committee to promote diversity, and through that committee, many plays and pageants have been put together, and community celebrations are held. We've seen more and more city mayors now become involved in promoting Cinco de Mayo festivals and events in their communities, where maybe a decade or 2 decades ago they were more reluctant to do that.
In addition to those examples that you just gave, there's a Native Idaho that's playing a very important role with the Association of Idaho Cities in relation to this conference and also beyond this conference. That's Mr. Greg Carr, who's been extremely successful with his business financially, but he's also a very generous man. He has just recently given $500,000. It was more than matched by the people of Idaho for the Anne Frank Memorial in Boise. He's also giving money for coordinators in, I believe, Boise and Coeur d'Alene to deal with some of the diversity questions we've talked about. Would you like to take a little time to share with our viewers who are also outside of Idaho how a native of one state can, again, I'm over in the business arena now, think that can be a major step forward in this movement to be inclusive?
Yes, Tony, and we're very grateful to Greg Carr for his support and assistance in this effort. And the Association of Idaho Cities has invited Greg Carr and the Carr Foundation to be part of this conference, to which they've graciously responded and have provided great assistance in sponsoring just a stunning array of speakers and presenters and workshops at the conference. And has really made a long-term commitment, and it's a deep, abiding passion that Greg Carr has for human rights, internationally, nationally, but right here at home in Idaho.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you to do one other thing before I go back to Janelle. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you to do this, but we were talking again before the program, and I was so taken by that powerful story of a poem, Cold Within. I just think it would be so helpful to our viewers and other leaders who are listening to our program. Would you take a moment to share that? I think it just says so much about whether we're going to progress forward in our relationships as human beings or we're going to have regress.
I would be pleased to, because I just read this poem last night and it had a powerful impact on me. I think maybe it's because of the conference, but I think the message is there. Let me just set the stage for what's going on in the poem. There are 6 men who are gathered around a fire, and they're out in the very, very bleak, cold environment, near freezing, and they have a fire, and each man is holding a log which they can add to the fire, and if they do that, all will keep warm. But as the fire begins to dim, the first man clutches his log and holds it back, because across the way he sees a man whose face is black, and he's not going to add his log to the fire for that reason. The second person holding his log looks across and sees someone who belongs to a different church than he does, and so he's reluctant then also to contribute to the warmth of the fire. A third man is there in tattered clothes, and he clutches his coat, and he thinks that he's not going to add his log just to contribute to the warmth of someone who may be more rich than he is. And then the rich man also thinking that he's not going to share because he could contribute to the warmth of maybe what he would perceive as the shiftless, idle poor. And so his concern is how he can preserve what he has earned and not to share it. And then the black man also holds his log and is reluctant to share it, because to him now it becomes a symbolic way to get some spite for those he thinks has abused him in the past. And then the final man in this forlorn company is reluctant also to add his log, because he only gives when others have given to him, and no one else has given, so he's not going to share. So the poem ends then with each of the 6 men still holding their log in death's grip, and they did not die from the cold without. They died from the cold within.
That just says volumes of what human relationships face. Thank you very much. Janelle?
It's hard to go on from there, but my question will have to do with the people who live outside corporate limits, but outside the city limits, but may in fact attach themselves to the city. Do you find that those people often also have something to contribute to the city? And how do people become attached to one city or another?
Well, and you make an excellent point with that question now, because the whole notion of community transcends geographical boundaries. It transcends city limits. And so the whole notion of community is sharing and bringing people together. And so even with our effort with the Association of Idaho Cities, we hope to work very closely with faith groups and with businesses and nonprofit associations and with county governments, state government, all who have a shared agenda of making Idaho a better place to live, work, raise a family, and who really value deep within the psyche of each of us. We should have and I should say beyond the psyche, our heart and soul, recognize the abiding dignity and worth of each person.
Now, in Idaho, we have, of course, cities, and then we have counties, and we have state government. How do all of these things work together? how do you perceive that they should be working together in order to provide a better quality of life for people in individual communities?
Well, we believe that you win agreements, not arguments. We believe in the power of cooperation and collaboration. And where municipal leaders, city leaders, can play such an important role, you think of the office of mayor. The mayor has convening power, has ability to call meetings and bring people together, but there will be hundreds and thousands of other citizens and from other organizations who will link arms in helping to make communities healthier in Idaho.
In relation to that question, another component in your conference, and it certainly has a relationship directly with people's dignity, and that is conflict resolution. There's been a wonderful, actually private group in Boise that's over the years dealt with peaceful resolution of conflict or peaceful settlement conferences. Mm-hmm. Now I see that your association is working in that arena too. Would you share with our viewers some of the characteristics of how one can best I'll back up and say communities certainly can have conflict, and we're not talking about dealing with race and gender and all those very important questions, but just disputes over planning and zoning, economic questions, and others. How can we learn more about win-win in negotiations with one another?
Well, there will always be challenges within a city. I remember, Tony, some years ago, reading the Wall Street Journal, front page where they have the very short stories, then you find more detail back in the paper. But on the front page, it talked of a very large geographic area in Texas that had no crime, no pollution. And I quickly flipped the pages, get to back the rest story, and I also found they had no people living in that area as well. So where we have people, it does give rise to some conflicts. One of the things that we're really emphasizing at this conference and the continued training that will follow are some very important skills in dealing with those conflicts, because that unattended to, that conflicts just continue to escalate, where there'll be accusations and counter-accusations and blame and then reaction to that, and it just continues to escalate. And there are far too many examples, not only in Idaho, but across the nation in that sort of conflict escalation. And there's a certain skill set that can be taught, how people can communicate, how we can begin to really understand another person's point of view. That doesn't mean that we agree with them, but empathic listening and a process of training people to begin to see issues from other points of view can lead to solutions, can lead to peaceful and appropriate and civil ways to deal with those differences.
Thank you. Janelle.
In particular, some of the cities in Idaho are considered to be very desirable places to live. All the state of Idaho is considered to be a desirable place to live, and many people are moving here from all across the country. How do we preserve this quality of life that we've had, hold on to the things that we find that are dear to us, and yet at the same time welcome those who are coming in? Isn't there a great dichotomy between the people who have been here and the people who are coming?
Well, that is a challenge, and Idaho continues to change. And you're certainly right about it being a beautiful and a wonderful place. And I think we would want to try to promote ways to preserve all that's good about Idaho. But in doing that, we also recognize how important it is to extend the hand of friendship and fellowship to those who may be moving in, and just continue to make Idaho a better place to live. And I think if we do those things to create better cities, we will create a better state.
Now, a part of creating that better city is to maintain a lot of that recreation that we've always found to be very desirable in our part of the state. For example, maintaining our ability to still have some of that recreation, but at the same time to have a town or cities that are well equipped to handle a number of citizens. I guess what I'm saying is we have to maintain some kind of a basic structure for growth, perhaps streets, and how are all those things paid for, and how are they determined? How many streets are we going to have? If we build streets, will people come? Fill them up.
And I suppose they do. And sometimes just building bigger streets and more freeways is synonymous with trying to cure obesity by loosening our belt. It doesn't always.
What a good analogy.
It doesn't always work, but it's important to plan for the future, and that's something else that we do in our training with civic leaders. We train on strategic planning and the power of visioning, and visioning has been said to be one of the highest motivating factors for men and women. That visioning allows us to create what does not yet exist. It allows us to become what we not yet are. It allows us to live out of our imagination instead of out of our memory. That literally the future can be created. The future is before us as a blank canvas, and those here today are the artists that will paint the picture of what the future of Idaho will be.
We're very short on time. We have about a minute left, but are a number of the cities looking at the future through some plans? Futurism is a big issue in some parts of the world. Hawaii, for example, the state that's dealt a lot with futurism. Are we getting a lot of information about 20 years or 25 from now, what a city would look like?
Tony, there are many city leaders and planners who are projecting out a quarter of a century and beyond, and that's very important to do, because to make good short-term decisions, it's important to have a good long-term plan and a long-term vision.
On that note, I have to bring the program to conclusion. Ken Harward, thank you so much as the Executive Director of the Association of Idaho Cities for being with us while your conference is here on building healthy communities. Again, on behalf of Janelle and our staff, we thank you, and I hope you'll take word back to your association that we were so pleased, one, that they chose our city in which to hold the conference, and number two, that they picked such an important topic, and we are very optimistic of the future with that kind of issue.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time, and we will continue this series on building healthy communities. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
We're most pleased to welcome you to part two of a three-part series titled Building Healthy Communities. We're very grateful to the Association of Idaho Cities that have made these programs possible. We're taping this in the summer of the year 2000 as they're in our city for a conference, and of course as you're viewing it, it is in the fall. We have two highly qualified guests today to discuss this very important topic, and we're grateful that they took time away from the conference to do this program with us. First of all, I welcome to the program Mayor Brent Coles. He is the mayor of our largest city in Idaho, Boise. Prior to taking that position, he served on the city council for 10 years, and he also was a city planner. I'm very pleased to announce on our program today that recently he was chosen as president of the United States Conference of Mayors. Mayor Coles, welcome and congratulations on this appointment. It's wonderful to have the president of that nationwide organization headquartered in Idaho for the next year.
Thank you very much.
And I'm equally pleased to welcome to our program Gregory C. Carr. He is the co-founder of the Boston Technology Incorporated, and he served from 1986 as CEO until 1992. Also from 1996 to 1998, he was chairman of Prodigy Incorporated. He is with us today in the capacity as the advisory board chair for the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at the John Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And Greg is a native of Idaho Falls, and it's great to have you to come home, and congratulations on all your success, and we deeply thank you for what you're doing for human rights with your Carr Center at Harvard University. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, and I'm always happy for any reason to be in Idaho.
Well, it's great to have you here, and you have your staff here, and we thank both of you for what you're contributing to the conference here in Coeur d'Alene. I'm pleased to welcome our two regular panelists, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Steve Shink, who is the Vice President of College Relations and Development at Idaho College, and I shall invite Janelle to commence today's questioning with our distinguished guest.
Well, welcome to our program. We're happy to have you here and to talk about your organizations. In order to set the stage for the remainder of the program, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your organizations, and let's start with Mayor Coles first in regard to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. What exactly is that?
Well, thank you. And the U.S. Conference of Mayors is a national organization where mayors of cities of 30,000 and higher population are represented by their mayors, and they come together on national issues to work with the Congress, with the President, and also to exchange ideas internally, how we're managing our cities, what are the efficiencies, what are the issues of the day. And as President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, I have the opportunity to set the agenda for that year, and this year being a transition year from, we'll have a new President of the United States, we're going through an election. It's important that the nation's cities, that our voice be heard throughout the campaign, and then going on into forming a new government.
And Greg, it's a pleasure to have you here too. And can you tell us about your institution?
Thank you. Well, the human rights movement internationally and nationally in the past 10 years has really been growing. However, universities had actually not really shown up to the party. And so starting about 2 or 3 years ago, I began working with faculty at Harvard's Kennedy School to develop a human rights center there. And the idea was to do research into what's working and what isn't working in human rights organizations worldwide, and also to provide training. A lot of times you have elected officials now, whether it's a mayor, a governor, or the head of a foreign country who says, yes, I want to do more human rights. They don't necessarily know what's next. And so we're providing training for elected officials as to how to implement human rights policies.
Would people who come to your center be people who are already elected to office? In some instances, they're not full-time students, I take it, although you may have some full-time students in the program as well.
Well, there's 3 kinds of people that might come to the program at different points in their career. We do have master's degree students getting a master's in public policy, a 2-year program, but also we would bring in elected officials in what might be a shorter 4-week executive training session. And also, we will sometimes take senior officials from who are in elite positions of foreign policy or human rights policy and bring them in for a year as a fellow.
Steve Shink.
I want to get back to the overriding theme of building healthy communities, but I can't resist, given my background. A quick question, if you don't mind speculating. I was struck by the fact that universities, of all places, it would seem, relate to come to the party, as you put it, on the topic of human rights. Any thoughts about why that is, or was?
Boy, the short answer of what could be a long story is that I think that after World War II, there was a big movement in the world to do human rights, but frankly, it got shut down by the Cold War. And for about 40 years, human rights conversations were kind of in the refrigerator around the world as everybody worried about East-West military tensions. Mm-hmm. So starting in about 1990, the world woke up again to human rights, and it just takes time for universities to develop curricula and research programs.
Interesting. Thank you for letting me digress. Back to that topic again, and if I may, Mayor Coles, I think the Idaho Association of Cities has as its theme building healthy communities with the sub-theme of rights, responsibilities, and respect. Would the two of you talk just a little bit about how those 3 elements play into that larger theme of building healthy communities?
Well, mayors and council members and the city clerks, your public servants, every day they're dealing with the issues of a healthy city, whether it's the public safety or the clean water, clean air, economic development, jobs, education. And so daily they're involved in that struggle to provide for their community and for the health of that community. The opportunity to think about human rights and to think about human dignity comes up again almost daily, whether it's children out on the ball diamond and how they're being treated and how they feel, and self-respect and self-esteem, and then the economic differences within families and within your community, and you see those every day. And so we've appreciated Greg Carr because this could be a theme that just internationally people think about, but Greg recognized the opportunity that local elected officials have to provide leadership and need training and want training and want to make a difference every day in their community. So the Association of Idaho Cities, which as of late has seen some great opportunities to do things statewide at a grassroots level. The Enough is Enough program is an example of that, a drug education program that the Association of Idaho Cities at a grassroots level, working together, mayors, council members, chiefs of police, etc., made a difference. And we said, well, there are other issues that we need support. It just helps by working together. If other cities are doing the same thing. And on the opportunity, the idea of civility and respect and tolerance, they're words a council member or mayor uses every day. But now we have the opportunity to receive training that is international and national in scope, and we can impact our state through the Association of Idaho Cities and its members.
I want to build on that. Mayor Coles, I was reading the newspaper the day after you were elected president, or you took office at the Seattle conference, and I was just elated when I saw your agenda for the coming year, a 3-point program. But what got my attention was, and I commend you highly for this, that human rights is part of the agenda. Each president obviously has a particular program, and I want to first of all publicly thank you. But secondly, I want to make a comment and get you to respond. Marty Peterson, who's with the University of Idaho and has worked in state government, said at this conference that the political process at city level is most crucial. That's where the rubber hits the road, as he said, political rubber hits the road. And so I think that's where you're coming from in relation to this position you hold. Would you share some more detail with us about how we can so affect the dignity of human beings and promote human rights by doing it at the local government level? Let me just say one other thing before you respond. Many of us have worked in human rights or civil rights for a very long time in the private sector. This is so encouraging what the association is doing and what you're doing now as heading the mayors of the country. What is the role of local government in working with private sector, civil rights groups, and others in our society? Or, what a long question. What is your agenda in relation to putting that forth?
Oh, well, obviously the agenda is something that mayors in their own communities, they recognize where the opportunities are. And you do work with local organizations and national organizations. The relationship with Greg Carr and the Carr Institute, the policies that will be developed there, we want them to be practical policies that can be implemented at a local level, as well as, I'm sure, as we know, he's working on international issues. But so let's take, for example, Boise, Idaho, and you have the Anne Frank Museum come into town, and 40,000 of your students, young people, and families come for an educational opportunity through your museum and learn about Anne Frank and the Holocaust. And then a group comes together and says, Mayor, why don't we do something permanent? So this educational opportunity can be there for our residents in our Treasure Valley. So what do? We look at where along, in our case, along our green belt could we do that. So now along the green belt, we're looking at an Anne Frank memorial and an educational opportunity, and we'll put a wall up and it will have civil rights and human rights statements along that wall, and Anne Frank's overall statement. And so you have young people now, parents are taking their young people along our green belt for recreational and educational opportunity. And so again, you work with Greg Carr, and so now you've got the Carr Institute working with us. And every mayor across this nation, they're working on something like that. It could be the Black History Museum that we just put in Boise. Well, somewhere else they're working on that kind of an issue. There are so many opportunities for education and for mayors, council members, elected officials to step up, take a stand, make a statement, be an example, and encourage others to do likewise. And that really is the agenda. When I step up and talk about human rights, I'm talking to the mayors of America saying, you look within inside your city. We know you're struggling with this issue. Grab onto that issue and move it forward in your community in your way.
It'll touch all aspects of the community. And what's so wonderful about this Memorial in Boise, it'll be a teaching tool, particularly for young people, forever. And Greg Carr, we have to thank you. I know you're very modest about yourself, but I don't have to be modest for you. You gave $500,000 and you challenged people of Idaho, and they really responded with over $700,000. So this memorial not only will be a reminder daily, but also the programs that the Idaho Human Rights Center also has in mind. So we thank you very much. And let's follow up on that a little bit in relation to what the mayor was saying about what they can do. I know you have some ideas how government entities can work with private human rights groups. Would you share with us what some of your dreams are in that area, and for the Carr Center to be a catalyst in that whole process?
Yes, and I would like to mention that it was actually a letter from Mayor Coles to me that started this whole process rolling. And what people may not realize is that the mayors of this state, starting with Brant Coles and others, are leading this effort. And Idaho is actually ahead of other states right now in that it's elected officials who are saying, let's have a human rights conversation. And so often you see it's the outsiders trying to get people in office to listen to them on human rights issues. Right. And this is why it's very exciting what Brant Coles and others are doing in this state. The kinds of things that we hope to do in helping them is providing training tools, for instance, going into law enforcement agencies. Boise just instituted a new hate crimes policy, for instance, that showed real leadership on that issue. Also working in schools. We're developing K through 12 education that can get children first thinking about issues of diversity and respecting the person who lives next door who's different than you are. So you can start education from kindergarten all the way up through the chief of police and anything in between you can think.
Also, I know the mayor will appreciate this. I can say that this is the first Anne Frank Memorial in the entire United States. So again, right. Idaho is recognizing the importance of the issue. Janelle Berg.
Greg, let's start with you with a question. You have been very successful, and you were able to put your influence in a number of places. How did you happen to decide on human rights and this particular field? You could have decided on a lot of things. What was it that made you decide on this?
Well, it's
You're
an
Idaho
interesting
native.
question. It really is. I think we ought to look into our own hearts to try to decide when we take certain paths in life what happens. I think for me it was about 5 years ago. I had already felt like I had done the high-tech world. I was ready for something that would be more along the lines of helping the community. And in my case, I actually read a book by a Chinese dissident who had spent 20 years in prison for talking about democracy. And that really touched me. And it was just one of those moments where you say, that could have been me. And I think we all have that at some point in our lives. And then you say, well, I have to do something. So that was probably the start of my journey.
Mayor Coles, how about you? Did you have a turning point as well?
Oh, well, it was interesting because Greg gave me the opportunity to read that book by Harry Wu after we became acquainted, and that is a book that's really impacts your thinking and your beliefs. But obviously before that, because I was already supporting the Anne Frank Memorial, I guess really very early on in life, when I remember being in elementary school when civil rights struggles were going on, and through junior high, and President Kennedy and Martin Luther King and folks who stood up, leaders that stood up and said, this is enough. Enough is enough. And in the civil rights area, our country has gone through a lot of struggles, a lot of changes, but I think it frankly was probably instilled in me and my family that respect for another human being is the utmost important, the number one thing you can do with your life. And I think my parents started that process for me.
Relatively quick question before we go to Steve for Greg again. You mentioned that the Carr Institute is doing, or the Carr Center, I think you call it the Carr Center, right?
Yes.
The Carr Center is doing research into, is this really a problem? And what are you finding?
The research can be taken place on many different levels. One of the things that we're we're curious about is in the case of something like domestic abuse, for instance, an issue that affects all of America and certainly Idaho as well. One of the things you wonder is, why aren't these things reported more? When they are reported, why is it that there's no response? And on a more positive note, in the case where something successful happens, let's learn from those best practices and then educate others. So a lot of what we're hoping to do is look at what's working and what's not working in human rights and then pass that on.
Steve, I wonder if you'd both take a few minutes to respond to a feeling that I have, right or wrong, that there are lots of people out there concerned with their own rights. There are a number of people out there concerned with respect, and obviously I'm getting back to the sub-theme of the Idaho Association of Cities Conference. There are too few people out there, and I think I'm part of the problem, who are thinking about their own responsibilities in that issue of building healthy communities and in human rights. There are notable exceptions. You're notable exceptions. Tony Stewart is a very notable exception. But too few of us are thinking about what we can do. You share that feeling? Is it a problem?
Well, I'll go quickly. Brent is clearly someone who's working towards a solution. You're bringing up an important point in the basic philosophy or ideology of human rights. Some people feel that human rights is the right to do anything I want. That's not human rights. The human rights language and idea set is a balance of rights and responsibilities. And that is something that we in America sometimes forget. And we trumpet, well, I have a right to do this, right to do that. Well, we all have a responsibility to our society, and that needs to be part of the education.
Well, thank you, Greg. And I think an example, Steve Judy here is another example of a mayor stepping up and saying, it doesn't have to continue up here in northern Idaho. You know, we can do some things. And he's called upon Idaho citizens. I remember his Lemons to Lemonade campaign, and we were involved in that in Boise to turn things around, to turn a negative into a positive. Your question about the individual, maybe just the individual citizen out there who's going to work, working hard, taking care of their family, what is their individual responsibility and how can they make a difference? Obviously, number one is in their own home, in their own family, then into their workplace and into their neighborhood. Taking some time to read about these issues and to read about and to change some attitudes and stop the thinking that goes on. If a child comes home with an irresponsible comment about another human being, any human being in any way, to say, you know, we don't do that in our home. That impression at a very young age can change the world. It truly can. And then in the workplace, being the one person that, as you're moving through a business meeting, whatever is going on, but a disparaging comment about someone else, for whatever reason, just say, you know, we've got to stop that in our workplace. I think it's that kind of responsibility and sensitivity that can change. It can change the world, and that's part of what we're talking about. And so if a mayor does it, and if Greg's doing that, and the kind of opportunity for this discussion that we're having right now, if someone takes that message and takes it and internalizes it, and then does some research on it and talks to their colleagues about it, we'll see a great change.
Another quick question, if I may. Like all of you, I'm proud of what Idaho has done in the area of human rights. I'm afraid at times that we aren't known for that as much as we should be. Are there some lessons that other states, other regions can take from what's happened in Idaho? And if so, could you cite some specific examples of those?
You're looking at me, Greg.
You're the president of the National Conference of Mayors.
Absolutely. Well, I think the fact that we are having this dialogue statewide, if you look at back to the Association of Idaho Cities, when you gather with 360 elected or appointed officials in one conference, and you take a theme of respect and dignity and tolerance and civility and say the health of a community is more than just what we talked about, the infrastructure, but it's this kind of a social issue and education. You take that as an example. Imagine every state, if every state organization If it had mayors and council members, and let's say county commissioners, and if the governor's conference did the same thing, what a national discussion we would be having and debate over this. And we wouldn't all be agreeing on the solution, but we would all be in the debate. And I think that's maybe the model. Now for us, we're learning. This is a learning experience for the center and for us. We're working together. We've got from Harvard some great people who have great interest and experience in education. They're sharing with us, and we're sharing with them our own experiences. What is happening in the grocery store when the mayor walks in the door, when the city council member walks in the door, and this issue is coming up, or there's a hate crime in our community, there's an incident in our community. What are we doing? What are the tools that we can use? And we're gathering some of those tools today.
Well, something positive that I would say about Idaho is that people in Idaho are willing to begin this conversation, and that's the hardest part, is just starting to talk about it, whatever the issue may be. I've heard a lot of conversations this week by mayors saying, you know, there's a growing Hispanic community in our town. Do I know who those people are? Am I interacting with them? Do I know what their concerns are? Are any of them involved in city government in any way? And just hearing mayors step up and say, gee, I care, I'm going to talk about this, that's a start. And I'm told that, that Idaho is ahead of other states in that conversation.
Thank you.
I want to have two different questions that are totally different, the two of you. Mayor, first of all, Mayor Coles, what you're doing and others in our state and other places is something, and presidents have done this also, the United States, and that is you're using the bully pulpit. And I want you to react to that. I commend you for that. But by using the bully pulpit, there are some people who've moved to this state of Idaho who are described as hate groups. And they said they came here because they would be accepted and their doctrine would be accepted. And they were looking for a white enclave. You're saying a different message, so I'd like to get you to react to that. Okay. And I think that's very, very much, and the position you're going to hold for a year is sending a marvelous message around the country to hate groups that they're not going to find in Idaho what they thought.
Well, sure, that's an important message, isn't it? Just that message that isn't what Idaho is. That isn't what you're going to find here. I was born in Idaho, raised in Idaho, educated in Idaho. This is a wonderful place to live, and we enjoy our wonderful outdoors. But we also respect each other, and diversity is important to us. And as we've talked a lot about this week, about this is the most diverse nation on earth. It's the most economic, prosperous nation on earth. Well, why is that? Do those two ideas, do those two facts, are they working together for us and are positive for us? Yes. Is Idaho a wonderful, prosperous place to live? Yes. Is diversity important to us? Yes. And then human dignity is absolutely number one in our state. It's what we believe in. We can define it. We can feel it. We can sense it. We know it's right. And we'll use that pulpit to talk about that all year long.
And you just did a great job of it. We're talking about children. That's where the future is. And asset scores and testing and so forth. I was talking to my dear friend Marilyn Schiller about this today. Yeah. We're finding that in the quartiles, as you look at it, those young people who have been given most training at home and they have a head start in a sense and have high self-esteem, they have a totally different attitude about human rights than other groups. So your center, I know, is interested in that too. Gregory Carr, would you take us a moment to tell us what you see in that area for what we should be doing in your center concerning young people?
Well, yes, and I've learned some things from fellow Idahoans here this week. Yesterday, someone was talking about the fact that if a child doesn't learn how to read, for instance, by about the third grade, then their self-esteem starts to go down, right. and then they start to become angry, and then by the time they're in high school, they're involved in fistfights or whatever kind of small crime or problems, and those issues didn't start in high school; they started 10 years before that, and so we've got to realize that that the education that the children are getting at home, first of all, and then in school, is you're creating the adult.
Janelle Burke, you have about a minute and a half.
Well, we do have a very short time, but I want to give you an opportunity, one or the other of you, to talk about the breadth of the human rights movement, that it isn't just a narrow concept, but it's a very broad concept. Greg, perhaps you could talk about that.
Yeah, human rights ideas are found in a lot of different places. It starts with the Declaration of Independence. It starts with the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and I think most Americans know those basic rights: the right to a fair trial, right not to be tortured, right to be presumed innocent, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Those are the core principles. But there's more to human rights language than that. And Brent's been talking about the concept of dignity. The first article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that all humans are born equal in dignity and rights. So the issue of diversity, respecting the person who is next to you, who's different than you are, is an expanded aspect of the human rights conversation.
About 20 seconds, Mayor.
Well, we all have a lot to learn about human rights and human dignity and civility and respect and tolerance, and I think that's part of this dialogue. How broad is it? But I think, as we've said, it starts there in home, it starts in our neighborhood, it starts in our community, and I think right here in Idaho, we're going to define it. We'll make a difference.
Thank both of you so much. On behalf of our panel and staff, I want to thank so much Mayor Brent Coles and Gregory C. Carr for absolutely a wonderful program. It's been informative. We want to publicly thank you both for what you're doing, and history will record that you're doing the right thing, and Idaho will be a better place because of people like you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll join us again next week when we do part 3 of this series, Building Healthy Communities. And we are very grateful to the Association of Idaho Cities for allowing us to have this 3-week series. And once we complete that program next week, we'll move yet to another subject the week after. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
With today's program, we conclude a 3-part series titled Building Healthy Communities. We're very grateful to the Association of Idaho Cities that's been in our community, having a conference and providing these guests. These programs are being taped in the summer of the year 2000, will air this fall. I'm so pleased to welcome 2 guests to the program today. First of all is Linda Millam, who is the mayor of Idaho Falls. She also serves as the chair of the Legislative Committee of the Association of Idaho Cities. Mayor Millam, welcome to our program. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
And I'm equally pleased to have Doug Manning, who is the mayor of Burley. He is also the 2nd vice president of the Association of Idaho Cities. Mayor Manning, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Delightful to be here.
And as always, I'm pleased to have regular panelist Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in the state of Idaho, and I shall invite Janelle to commence today's question with our 2 Idaho City mayors.
It's delightful to have you here. And so I want to ask a question about your communities. I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about what's unique in your own community, because each of our Idaho communities has its own flavor and its own way of being. So I'd like to start with you, Mayor of Idaho Falls. And do you say Mayor Millam? Millam. Mayor Millam, can you tell us what about Idaho Falls is unique?
Well, I guess I could say everything is. We made a significant change in our community about 50 years ago. We were historically an agricultural community, as many are in Idaho. And then in 1949, the United States Navy and the Atomic Energy Commission each established facilities about 45 miles outside of Idaho Falls, but with administrative headquarters in the city. And that really changed us. It brought an influx of people with different skills, different education backgrounds, etc. And that has remained about an equal partner in terms of share of the economic base of the community. We're right on the Snake River, and have another area where we are unusual in that we have our own electric utility, produce about half of our power, which makes us unusual for Idaho cities as well. And it's a special place.
Thank you. Mayor Manning, what about Burley? How would you contrast Burley?
We have a
with
couple
Idaho
of things
Falls?
in common with Idaho Falls, in the fact we're also a power city. We have our own power facility. We're also on the banks of the Snake River as well. We're located, for those that don't know, about halfway between Boise and Salt Lake City. So we've done some other checking too. We're about halfway between Denver and Seattle and Fargo and Fresno. So we kind of say wherever you're going, we're halfway there. Burley has always been founded on the agricultural base. In fact, we're a result of the reclamation projects along the Snake River years and years ago, just after the turn of the century. We've been a processing area for potatoes and sugar beets primarily. Of course, the economic stability of the ag base now is a little soft, and so we're looking at some other areas to try to compensate for that. We really think in the next, I believe anyway, very firmly in the next 3 to 7 years that we may have as much growth and development as we've ever had at one point. And looking forward, a couple of breaks will really change the outlook of our city, and I think the economic base as well. So we look forward to that. We have great recreation facilities, as do so many cities in Idaho, and we like to exploit those as well.
Recently, we had the honor of having several guests from a conference for the University of Idaho, the Center for Business Development Research, and they were from states such as California and Montana and Idaho and Illinois. And within those cities, they're building what I would describe as very livable communities, as the university had advertised at conference. Some really unique programs are being put in place in development of some of those communities. Would you both share with us some of the things that are going on in your community today that distinguishes you in residential areas, parks, or industrial, and whatever? How are you planning for this growth that you both are having? And Mayor Milam, I'll start with you.
Well, we, as I mentioned, that we have the Snake River that goes right through the city, and we are fortunate that all along the banks on both sides of the river through the city there has been the development of parkland, walking paths, that kind of thing. Some cities have had to go back and reclaim their riverfronts. We were fortunate that there was not a tremendous amount of that had to be done. There is some, but not a tremendous amount. So that was a resource that was there that we've capitalized on. We have a lot of park land in terms of acreage for a community our size, and that has been tremendously important to people and has gotten a lot of support from organizations like Civitans, the Rotary Club, etc. In terms of the other things that make a community go, we are a retail center now for about 250,000 people over into Wyoming, up into Montana, even down into Utah, which always surprises me, the number of Utah license plates I see in the parking lots, etc. A medical center as well, very large. In fact, I think it may be the largest single facility hospital in the state. Industrial and manufacturing has been tricky for us because having agriculture and the INEEL as our prime economic base, we didn't have a lot of industry. Some communities have quite a lot. Pocatello, for example. We have not had a lot of that, and so we've tried in these last few years to make sure that there is appropriate land, appropriately zoned, with the resources in terms of utilities and such. We've put a lot of emphasis, we have an economic development organization that has put a lot of emphasis in not just economic development, but community development. There's more to a community than jobs. It's good education, it's a lifestyle, a quality of life, to use an overused phrase. And we felt all of those things were important to make us keep going, be vital.
Thank you. Mayor Manning?
Well, I think like, excuse me, a lot of cities throughout the state and throughout the Northwest and many other parts of the country, We focus on clean air, clean water, and the livability of the city and the resources that we have. We have, I think, one of the finest municipal golf courses you'll find. And I think if you say a city of 10,000 or less, I'd match ours against any, along with our riverfront recreation area. It's a gorgeous part of the Snake River. We are in the process of redoing some of our parks to make them more playground friendly to the kids that need to use them. We'll begin construction very soon, should be underway by the time the program airs, as a matter of fact, with a skate park for our people. We try to utilize the asset approach to give our young people more things to do than they currently have. We think we're poised for growth for a couple of other reasons that help us become a quality community. We have a hospital that's been built in the last few years. That's an outstanding facility. There's been a new surgical center that's opened in the last year. We have our regional technical center at our new high school that really, I think, is probably the pioneer program in the state of Idaho. It gives high school kids from the time they're juniors a chance to go to these programs, take these classes, and actually earn college credit while they're still in high school. And it prepares them for the workforce. We understand in our area, and we've been told because of some surveys we've done, we need to raise our academic standards, our education levels just a little bit to maybe meet the models that different industries and corporations look for when they relocate. Consequently, we try to focus on that and encourage people to increase their education. The old high school was purchased by the College of Southern Idaho, and we have a Burley campus now, and we have more people constantly enrolling there. And we look for that to be a very important aspect of our city's development, along with the Regional Tech Center and our high school, which, by the way, includes a fine arts center that seats about, I believe, 12 to 1,300 people, which has kind of become the social gathering place of the city. More people go, and I think about now there's been somewhat around 150,000 people that have gone to events there since the school opened, which would have been a year ago, in March of '98. Which is, that's for Burley, America, that's pretty amazing. And so we have those types of things. We think that's going to increase the livability of our community and really poise us where we can grow and develop. But we still want to try to keep the quality of life that we all cherish here in the state.
Both what you said is so appropriate to building healthy communities, which is the theme of this conference. And I hear you saying that you're very interested in your medical services, your education, your parks, your rivers, your employment, and so forth. So you both have been very involved in a very broad-based commitment to your people. Janelle?
It's interesting that you have come here to this conference and that you are learning about a number of things. And the theme of the conference, as I understand it, has been centered around human rights. In your communities, what kinds of things have been done? Let's start with you this time, Mayor Manning. What kinds of things have been done to assist the citizens of the community? And it might be helpful to know somewhat about the demographics of your area, because I believe your area is unique in the state, too.
It is, in a way. The city of Burley, actually Caddo County, I should say, probably, I think the Hispanic population is about 14%. We have about a 30% population in our two-county area, and a very valuable segment of our society in a number of fields, in a number of areas. And we continue to try to increase the communication between the two factions. I think that for the most part, we don't see a lot of serious racial problems that exist in the community. Kids grow up together. I think it's different than maybe it was, say, 30, 40 years ago. I see a lot of changes. And
do you hire Spanish-speaking people
oh, absolutely.
in some of your city positions?
Oh, absolutely. Behind the counters in our office, we have people that are bilingual, because it's a necessary point of communication with folks that maybe are just coming to the community, that don't have the English-speaking skills that they'll have in the future. And in conjunction with that, our school district had enough foresight where they implemented a newcomer center, that when people are moving to the area that don't have the English skills, they're put into this program, and I believe it's about a 6-month program, and they develop these skills, and they're able to facilitate those folks and put them into the regular programs, and their understanding levels are so much better, and it just makes for a healthier community, I feel.
Both adults and students of school
primarily
age?
The students coming in at that point. There are some facilities where the adults can go as well to enhance their second language.
And Mayor Milam, can you share with us something that's been done in your community? And it may be that differences between people are not necessarily based on race, but it may be more on level of education, for example.
It can be that. It can be religion. There are a number of things that can, if allowed to, can create tensions between people. We, a number of years ago, probably 12 years ago now, actually in response to an incident in a high school, the mayor at that time, Mayor Campbell, started a cultural awareness committee, and that has continued and has become revitalized in the last few years. In fact, the chairman and co-chairman or vice chairman of that committee are here for the conference this week. America's John Lewis and Sheila Olson, who I suppose are almost poster children for diversity in some respects. Different religions, different races, different abilities, different genders, yes. And what's wonderful about it is very, very good friends. But out of their interest, the committee has taken on a number of projects. They sponsor the Heritage Festival. Used to be called the Ethnic Heritage Festival, and the committee suggested we dispose of that word and we just call it the Heritage Festival. They have produced, along with the ABC affiliate in our community, a film called The Many Faces of Idaho Falls, and it talks about the kinds of discrimination that can be felt and the efforts that you can make to overcome them. One of the things that comes across so strongly to me is that the discrimination is by and large subtle, no less serious. In fact, in some ways, maybe more so, because it's covert, I suppose, is the word, and can make life uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is not a thing you want to feel in your community. A side light or offshoot of the Mayor's Committee has been an organization also involving AJ and Sheila called Unity in the Community that involves a broad range of faith groups. The Jewish faith, the Muslim, LDS, Protestant, Catholic, Baha'i. Just really has been a fascinating thing to watch. Progressive dinners, prayer-a-thons, if you'll pardon the expression, and it is people doing that. Government can support it. So the Mayor's Committee, it is policy. Our police department works with the committee. Our Parks Division works with the committee. But it's people who are doing it. Government can't say it shall be done. It's got to be people who make it happen, and they have really taken hold on this.
I was president of a regional human rights organization when Mayor Campbell was in office, and we were there when following the incident. And that's leading me to my question. But he, like you, is very, very astute and farsighted in how he looked at things. And so, what I'd like for you to address first of all, Mayor Milam, and then I'll ask Mayor Manning, when incidents take place, and it just takes one person to create an incident, and we've had that here at times over the years. What advice do you have from the experiences that you and Mayor Campbell have had? How does a community, both the government and the people of the community, deal with an incident when it takes place? Say it's a hate crime.
Well, I can give you an example.
Sure.
There was a young man and I won't go into details, but there was a young man who had received copies of an incredibly offensive flyer, a white supremacist flyer. And he made copies and he distributed them in a portion of our town, about an 8-block area. And they were put in the doorways of people. The committee decided that one way to counteract that, we try to be proactive, But there are times when you have to be reactive. In this case, we wanted to react in a positive way. So they took blue ribbons, bows of blue, to all of those homes and asked the people if they wanted to show how much they disagreed with that flyer and that position, would they please tie those bows to the door, to the mailbox, to the front step, whatever. All over in that 8-block area, those bows showed up. But even better, other areas in town, people put blue bows out. It was quiet. It didn't take a lot of money. It didn't take a lot of organization. It was simply a very human response. And I think if you can take something that is so negative and turn it around to show those who did that act that the people didn't much like it and didn't mind being known in their neighborhood for not having liked it. So that's one example, but I've always liked the blue ribbons.
You said something very, very significant, very powerful, is that a community needs to be proactive, but they do have to also be reactive, because those incidents will happen from time to time, and you, not to be reactive is to ignore it.
And you were absolutely right. One person.
Yes.
And in a community of 50,000, in fact, this person did not live within the city of Idaho Falls, although chose to carry out his acts within our city. But one person can overshadow 50,000 people.
Oh, yeah.
It's very sad.
Let me add one footnote, and then I'll ask Mayor Manning about this issue too. An incident took place here, a number of incidents back in the 80s, and our community did something very similar. We used orange ribbons, and the day that we organized that, people put them on their homes, on their cars and trees, and in one day we distributed 6,000 ribbons that went beyond the city throughout the county. And as she said, it's silent, but it's not silent. It's very, everybody knows why it's being done. It's very powerful. Mayor Manning, would you like to address this question too, using your expertise for other communities, as the mayor of Idaho Falls has just done?
I don't remember the last time that anything happened in Burley or the surrounding areas that could be classified as a hate crime. That's not to say that there aren't incidences that occur, but I think those times when they do, it's not so much a basis of an ethnicity as it is just people that disagree on different things, whether it's, the things you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off or things like that. That's about as serious, I think, as it gets in Burley. We are fortunate to have some very top-notch police officers on our police force of Hispanic origin and other people that are bilingual. So I think that the overall blend in the area is very good. I think the level of understanding is good. There's always room for improvement, obviously. My heart goes out to those people that go through those types of things, because I'm 47 years old. I have never been persecuted because of my religious beliefs or because of what my political opinions. I've never been driven from my home because of my ancestry or anything like that. And it's difficult for me to make the equation to people that do that. My heart goes out to people who are judged because of skin color or religious affiliation. I don't understand that type of thinking. I wasn't raised that way. I had a grandmother, for instance, that had we ever made any statements that could have even been minusculely construed as being racist, well, we were scared of Grandma. and she would have taken care of the thing. I've been scared of 3 people in my life: my mother, my wife, and my grandmother. And it just wasn't allowed in our house. It just was never viewed that way. I'm grateful I was raised that way, and I wish more people were. But I don't remember the last time we had a thing that was really would be considered not hate crime or hate event that occurred in the area. I may be wrong, but I don't know of any.
You've hit a very important note here, and that has to do with rearing of children and families. And so in communities such as what you speak to, is that if you raise children a certain way, the harmonious feeling. And Mayor Milam, you made a really important point too in relation to this, and that is, how do people feel in their community, the warmth that one can have. I appreciate that. Janelle Burke.
We talked earlier that you're here for a conference. Can you share with us some of the things that you've learned so far at the conference? What kinds of events have you attended, and what did you learn from them? And let's start with Mayor Milam.
Well, this afternoon was a very interesting afternoon. We had a speaker from the Kennedy School of Government, who is an expert.
And tell us where
in-
the Kennedy School of Government is.
At Harvard University, yes. And whose specialty and expertise is in negotiation and conflict resolution. And he had a good long presentation, probably 45 minutes, with a lot of terms that are used to explain how conflicts happen, how they escalate. And it was all very interesting, and it was all very academic, and you could understand it and take notes. Then there was a 45-minute video, I believe, called The American Dream. And it was about the strike at the Hormel factory in Austin, Minnesota. And it brought home all the lessons that he had given us in the previous 45 minutes. You saw how the conflict escalated. You saw how people reached a point that they couldn't step back. You saw how the internal pressures made it, within a group, made it almost impossible for people to dissent, and created such rifts between people within the group when there was dissension that it essentially tore at the whole fabric of the community. And it told us in a very clear way exactly the kinds of things that he had talked about. And I could see them. We've had public hearings where very contentious, difficult issues, split votes, a decision is made. After the decision is made, someone will come up and say, "You did the right thing. I just couldn't say that because they had neighbors who felt so strongly the other way, and they didn't want to create a rift within the neighborhood." Well, you can understand that. But it's that inability to deal with those issues and not create those divisions between ourselves just because we disagree. It's a tough one. It's been very interesting.
Mayor Manning, you strike me as the kind of person that people probably stop a lot in the grocery store and ask the question, why did this happen? What went on there? How do you avoid having things just escalate? As a mayor, I'm sure there are a lot of times you have to bite your tongue.
I have a lot of scar tissue on my tongue. I think we all do in association. You're right. It's difficult. Fortunately, as a smaller community, we have people that we've known since we were able to walk or talk, and people that have known us since the time we were born. And the communication level usually is pretty good. If people just come and ask the questions rather than just assume, we can take care of a lot of problems before they actually begin. I think this particular conference is going to have some far-reaching impacts, and it may not be until a few years down the road. I really think, like the Enough is Enough program that the association pushed heavily in the last 2 or 3 years, I think that program made a difference because the association got behind it. I think our platform, our theme this year with the human rights activism, I think that will make a huge difference that may not be felt for a few years. I really believe that maybe 15 or 20 years down the road, somebody is going to talk about the AIC's Human Rights Conference. And we're going to be able to say, Linda and I and everyone else that's here at the conference will be able to say, we were there that year. And I think people are going to say, tell us what happened and how this got started. I believe it's going to make a change in this state and make the state even greater than it is. I see nothing but great things on the horizon for the state of Idaho.
I've had the privilege of attending part of this conference and at a dinner last night. I want to echo what you're saying, Mayor Manning. I think that it's very difficult to be visionary, but I think you just were. And I think this is a huge step forward in our state. And I want to commend the Association of Idaho Cities as government entities joining with private groups like civil rights or human rights groups. And I think we'll keep this tape, and you will be proven correct. And
that's the case.
We thank both of you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
You've been generous with your time, and when you're at a conference and you're very busy, and we took you away at 5 o'clock just about dinner time, and you both have been very, very generous with your time. And on behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff, I want to thank Mayor Linda Milam from Idaho Falls and Mayor Doug Manning from Burley for being with us, and take our wishes back to your association. And we want to thank you for coming to our city. We want to thank you for picking the topic that you have. It's been most rewarding for us.
Thank you.
and come and see us again. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring to a conclusion this 3-week series from the Association of Idaho Cities called Building Healthy Communities, and next week we'll move to another topic. I hope you'll be with us then. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.